Hi everyone, this is Professor Ramirez and I would like to share with you a PowerPoint called Beginnings, Endings, and Coming Full Circle in the Moonstone, a Victorian novel by Wilkie Collins. In what follows, I will address the origin of the diamond in India. I'll look briefly at the journey that the diamond takes from India to England and then back to India. I'll consider what kind of gift Herncastle has given his niece, Rachel Verinder. I'll also look at the theft of the diamond and investigation of that theft by characters like Ezra and Blake. And then I'll briefly explore the idea that the diamond brings with it a curse, and this also involves the role of the three Brahmin priests because their job is to protect the diamond. And we'll look at finally the perspective of Mirthwaite, who observes the journey of the diamond back to a sacred temple or back to a sacred site in Somnath, India. So first, let's look at the idea that the diamond is associated with the Hindu god Vishnu, the preserver. And what I'd like you to know in this sculpture is that Vishnu has 4 arms, and he has characteristics that are both male and female. And he occupies a very important place in the sculpture, and we can tell that by his size. So we learn in the narrative itself that the moonstone is set in the forehead of an Indian god, which we learn is Vishnu. The earliest known traditions describe the stone as having been set in the forehead of the 4-handed Indian god, who typifies the moon, partly from its peculiar color, partly from a superstition which represented it as feeling the influence of the deity whom it adorned, and growing and lessening in luster with the waxing and waning of the moon. It first gained the name by which it continues to be known in India to this day, the name of the moonstone. So this paragraph just explains why the moonstone has its name and where it comes from, and what belief system accompanies the moonstone, and how it's a holy stone, it's a sacred stone. In 1799, we learned that the diamond is stolen during Herncastle's storming of the temple in Seringapatam. And what you're looking at is a map of India in the 1800s, 1857 precisely. And what you'll see is that each of the territories that are red are occupied by the British. Now, why were the British there? They were interested in the precious resources of India, tea, Darjeeling tea, precious silks, and other kinds of things that they could export from India to Britain or its colonies. So after Herncastle brings the diamond to England, he arranges in his will for the diamond to be given to Rachel. So in 1848, Blake takes the diamond to Yorkshire, and this is an approximation of the kind of manner that the Verinder family would have lived in on the east coast of England. So on her birthday in 1848, Herncastle bequeaths this diamond to Rachel. And as you can see from this image, the diamond is not clear. It has a yellow crystalline quality to it. And so that's one thing to keep in mind, that it really does evoke this moon with its yellow light. And we can also see that the diamond is extraordinarily large. So after the diamond goes missing, Blake enlists Ezra Jennings to help him recreate the scene of the crime and to try to figure out why it was that Blake was in Rachel's room. And what they're doing in this particular scene is they're reviewing Dr. Candy's utterances. And so we know from Dr. Candy that he had slipped Blake a sedative, opium, so that he could sleep well. And Ezra is explaining how he's assembled this narrative and put it into a coherent order. And of course, order is one of the themes that's very important in the Moonstone, because Blake needs to take information and he needs to piece it together so that things make sense. Also, as part of the investigation, Ezra needs to figure out how sensitive Blake is to opium. So he asks, have you ever been accustomed to the use of opium? This would determine how strongly the sedative would affect Franklin Blake. And of course, Blake has never had opium, and so he's very strongly affected by it. But this is a scene from the book where Ezra is trying to figure out why it was that Blake was walking around with his eyes open, sort of in a trance, and he figures out, okay, maybe there is something, it has something to do with the opium. So we've just very briefly addressed the theft of the diamond. We know that Blake was in Rachel Verringer's room. We know that Blake picked up the diamond and then dropped it, but we don't really know what happens after that. And one of the things that we want to think about is the notion of the curse of the diamond. So you'll reflect back that the diamond has its origin in India, and it's associated with Vishnu. The deity Vishnu commanded that the Moonstone should be watched from that time forth by 3 priests in turn, night and day, to the end of the generations of men. And the Brahmins heard and bowed before his will. The deity predicted certain disaster to the presumptuous mortal who laid hands on the sacred gem, and to all of his house and name who received it after him. So we can already see that the diamond has upset the Verringer household. Instead of bringing Rachel great joy, it has broken her heart. Instead of enriching the Verringer family, it's just broken everybody apart. We've also had great loss with Rosanna. Franklin Blake and Rachel don't trust one another. They're having difficulty understanding one another. And so we might look at this as part of the curse. Another way to look at the curse is that it affects Godfrey Ablewhite. And we know from the end of the novel that it was Godfrey who took the diamond and who hawked it. And the Brahmin priests, true to their role as protectors of the diamond, they reclaim it from Godfrey. And this is an image where we're ascertaining the identity of the man in the bed, and we know that it's Godfrey in disguise. So the curse has definitely come to Godfrey. The last thing that I want to talk about is how the Moonstone returns to India. And I love this image because, again, it shows that it's a yellow brilliant diamond of such great size. And there's some satisfaction in Murthwaite's observations. He says, there, raised high on a throne, seated on his typical antelope, with his 4 arms stretching toward the 4 corners of the earth, there soared above us, dark and awful in the mystic light of heaven, the god of the moon. And there, in the forehead of the deity, gleamed the yellow diamond, whose splendor had last shone on me in England from the bosom of a woman's dress. Yes, after the lapse of 8 centuries, the Moonstone looks forth once more over the walls of the sacred city in which its story first began. How it has found its way back to its wild native land, and by what accident or by what crime the Indians regained possession of their sacred gem, may be in your knowledge, but it is not in mine. You have lost sight of it in England, and, if I know anything of this people, you have lost sight of it forever. What will be the next adventures of the Moonstone? Who can tell? And the novel, again, wraps up with this image of Somnath in this city in a foreign, exotic, distant land. And we can imagine the procession and the restoration of the diamond. So I hope this review of the Moonstone was helpful.